Hello there. I'm Andy Cook. I'm one of the pastors here at Panama Baptist Church, and I want to welcome you to Panama Baptist Church Online. I was thinking it sure has been nice to see everything green up lately. I'm enjoying the warmer weather, and being able to be outside has been just really good for my spirit. Here at PBC, we're gearing up for another summer of ministry in Alaska and in our neck of the woods. For the Alaska ministry, you can help by joining the Craft Prep Work Party on May 31st. For the local ministry at Bethany Camp, guys can help by showing up for the work weekend June 6 and 7. Details for both events are available in the weekly email or by contacting us. We'd be glad to get you the information you need. I'm glad to have you help in participating in these incredible camp ministries that we have, like I said, here locally in Sinclairville, but also north of the Arctic Circle there in Alaska. Good stuff to be a part of. I want to pause before we go any further and just pray, all right? Heavenly Father, thank you so much that our little church here gets to have a ministry, an impact beyond its borders by participating and helping both Bethany Camp and Brooks Range Bible Camp there in Alaska. God, thank you that we've got people who get to volunteer during the summer. We've got people who get to help in prepping for that, like the opportunities I just mentioned a minute ago. God, I pray that you'll bring together all the details, all the people, the stuff, the craft supplies, the program ideas, the speakers, the participants, everything that we need, God, in order for you to do what you want to do this summer through these two camps. Lord, as I think about summer, I'm also thinking about those in our church family who are coming up on graduations. God, I pray for them. I pray that they will finish well. I pray for their families and the transitions that are coming up for them ever so quickly. God, I pray that you'll give them just a strong sense that you are with them during this time. And God, that leads me to another category of people that are near and dear to my heart. God, I want to pause and pray for the many in our church family who are just struggling with serious financial or health issues. God, I pray that you would come alongside them and that you would give them your comfort. God, that you would meet their needs in a very powerful, personal way. God, if it be your will for those who are sick, I pray that you would restore them so that they can enjoy fellowship with us and they can be on mission with us, participating fully in the life and mission of this church. God, I want to thank you again for who you are, and that despite whatever is happening, we can trust you and your character. Lord, may we give you our attention and our worship over the next several minutes. In Jesus' name, amen. All right, friends, here's the band. Feel free to sing along.
Father, let your kingdom come. Father, let your will be done on earth as in heaven, right here in my heart. Father, let your kingdom come. Father, let your will be done on times all the hosts of heaven. Who else could make every king bow down? Who else can whisper and darkness tremble? Only a holy God. What other beauty demands such praises? What other splendor outshines the sun? What other majesty rules with justice? Only a holy God. Come and behold him, the one and the only. Cry out, sing holy, forever a holy God. Come and worship the holy God. What other glory consumes like fire? What other power can raise the dead? What other name remains undefeated? Only a holy God. Come and behold him, the one and the only. Cry out, sing holy, forever a holy God. Come and worship the holy God. Who else could rescue me from my failing? Who else would offer his only son? Who else invites me to call him Father? Only a holy God. Only a holy God. Come and behold him, the one and the only. Cry out, sing holy, forever a holy God. Come and worship the holy God. Come and behold him, the one and the only. Cry out, sing holy, forever a holy God. Come and worship the holy God. Come and worship the holy God. Thanks for singing with us. You can have a seat.
Picture this. Imagine this scenario with me. You're in a bookstore, or maybe the library, and you're looking for a book to read. You don't necessarily have one in mind, but not just any book. It's got to be an interesting book. So you start browsing the shelves, and you're seeing the spines of the books, and they're all sticking out at you, and they're all trying to grab your attention. You know, there's a whole science behind this. Publishers know that they have just a split second to grab your attention. Make their book stand out from all the others. They want you to reach out and take that book off the shelf. So they come up with some things to try to grab your attention that communicate a message, right? Maybe they use colors, bright colors or something to get your attention. Maybe there's something in the font here that's trying to communicate something. Maybe there's a title that's trying to get your attention, or at the very least let you know what the book is going to be about. I just grabbed some of the books off my shelf. I mean, The Battle Plan for Prayer. All right, so I'm going to assume this book is about how to pray. This one's called How to Think. You know, a nice red cover. That's going to try to grab your attention. Killing Lions. That would make me stop and grab the book. You'll get through this. Or there's this one, Autopsy of a Deceased Church, and you probably can't see it, but it's a small little book, and there's a little tiny scalpel right up here. That would certainly grab your attention. This one I'm working my way through right now, The Art of Disagreeing. Like The Art of Disagreeing. All interesting titles, to be sure, that want to get your attention, and you would pick it up off the shelf. Now, imagine this. What if you're walking along and you're looking at the titles of the books? Again, you're looking for that interesting book, that intriguing book that's going to capture you as you read it, and you come across a book called Numbers. I mean, who would pick up a book called Numbers? Who wants to sit down and read a book that's just called Numbers, besides math teachers, maybe? I mean, what could possibly be interesting about that? Well, turns out quite a bit. There's actually a ton packed into the book of the Bible. It's the fourth book in the Bible, called Numbers. And that's where we're going with our next sermon series. You probably guessed that by the title slide. And what I want to do today in our time together is I'm going to set the stage for the rest of the series, kind of give you an intro to the book, just kind of paint the scene, set the scene here as to where we're at with the book of Numbers. And we're going to move quickly. We're going to jump through about the first third of the book today. And then after today, we're going to slam on the brakes quite a bit. So here we go. If you're ready, let's go. Here's what the book of Numbers is about. Let's start with the setting. The setting. I mentioned this, Numbers is the fourth book in the Bible. The first 6 books of the Bible are Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, Deuteronomy, Joshua. Now here's a quick synopsis of each one. Genesis, the beginning, right? We see the creation of the world. And in the book of Genesis, God makes a promise to Abraham. If you are with us on the Through the Word app, in God's providence, we actually covered Genesis chapter 12, the beginning of the nation of Israel. We covered that in this week's reading, which was just amazing how God lined these two things up, because we certainly didn't do that. Here's what we read in Genesis chapter 12, the first book of the Bible. The Lord said to Abram, "Go from your land, your relatives, and your father's house to the land that I will show you. And I will make you into a great nation." Now at this point in time, Abraham doesn't have any kids, okay? "I will make you into a great nation. I will bless you. I will make your name great, and you will be a blessing. I will bless those who bless you. I will curse anyone who treats you with contempt, and all the peoples on earth will be blessed through you." Okay, that's the book of Genesis. Now, in the book of Exodus, the second book of the Bible, we find the Israelites, this nation that God promised Abraham, they're in captivity. They're held in slavery under the Egyptians. And in the book of Exodus, we read the story of how God led the Israelites, right? He's remembering his promise to make them into a great nation, to give them this land. God leads the Israelites out of Egypt, and they head towards this place called the Promised Land. And as they travel out, God leads them to the base of Mount Sinai. And it's here, at the foot of this mountain, where Moses receives the 10 Commandments. Maybe you've heard of the 10 Commandments. That happens in the book of Exodus. And he receives the rest of the laws. And God affirms to Moses, he reassures him again of his promise to Abraham. And then at the end of the book of Exodus, God gives them instructions for building the tabernacle. But the book of Exodus ends, what you need to remember is, ends with them on the way to the Promised Land from the land of Egypt. Then comes the book of Leviticus, the third book in the Bible. A couple years back, we did a sermon series on Leviticus. Leviticus reminds us of the holiness of God. It's filled with instructions on sacrifices and feasts and things like that. And then the fifth book is Deuteronomy. It has the Israelites at the border of the Promised Land, right? So Exodus, they're traveling to the Promised Land. Now Deuteronomy, they're at the border of the Promised Land. They're listening to Moses' farewell speech, if you will. And then the book of Joshua, the sixth book, sees the Israelites actually going into the Promised Land. Okay, that's the setting. So what about Numbers? What's it about? Well, Where does that fit into the story? Well, the book of Numbers is all about how what should have been about a 10-day journey took 40 plus years. Now, we're going to spend several weeks in Numbers. But because we're going to jump around a little bit, there's some stories we're not going to cover. There's a lot that we are going to cover. It can be hard to get an overall sense of how the book flows. What is the purpose of the book of Numbers? So, with that in mind, I want to show you just a brief video that kind of explains Numbers from a 30,000-foot view, and then we're going to come back and dig into it a little bit more. So take a look at this.
The book of Numbers gets overlooked, partly because it has a really boring name.
Which is a shame. In the Hebrew tradition, the book's name is Bamidbar, which means in the wilderness. And it's an epic travelogue about Israel's journey through the desert on their way to the land promised to Abraham.
Now, this pilgrimage should only take about 2 weeks on foot.
But instead, it takes them about 40 years.
That's crazy. It's practically half of someone's lifetime.
Yeah, it's a very long camping trip with lots of interesting stories, but let's remember, it's most helpful to back up and start with how this book is designed.
Right.
So the book is broken up into 5 sections. There are 3 wilderness locations, broken up by 2 road trips that link all the pieces together.
The first wilderness section is Mount Sinai, right here on the map.
And then in the second section, they travel to a region called Paran.
A whole bunch of things happen here in the wilderness of Paran.
And then in this 4th section is Israel's road trip to Moab.
The book ends with a large section in the wilderness of Moab, right across the Jordan River from the Promised Land.
Now, through all of these sections, the storyline just flows like a gripping dramatic movie. Everything starts great, but then the trip goes horribly wrong, and it all ends with the final redemptive moment, the surprising act of God's grace.
So let's jump into this story. It all begins at the wilderness at Mount Sinai, and we've become really familiar with this mountain.
Yeah, if you remember, Israel came here after Egypt, and they formed a covenant with God here, got the 10 Commandments here, built the tabernacle here, and they've been at this mountain for 1 full year.
And now they take a census to number the people as they prepare to leave.
Right, and they're given these instructions for how to organize all those people in the camp. God's presence in the tabernacle, and then the tribe of Levi and the priests around it, and then the rest of the tribes around them. And this pattern, it's this visual symbol for how God's holiness is at the center of their existence as a people.
And they're told that when the cloud of God's presence moves, they're to pack up and travel with it.
Yeah, the Ark of the Covenant is carried by the Levites out in front, and then the tribe of Judah, and on and on. And this order is also a symbol for how God's holy presence is their leader and guide through the wilderness.
We begin the second section of the book with enthusiasm as they leave Mount Sinai and travel up to Paran. God's with them, everything's organized. This is going to be great.
But it's not great. After just 3 days on the road, the people are complaining about their hunger and thirst, and then even Moses' brother and sister start bad-mouthing him in front of all the people.
Not a great start. But now we're into the third section, the wilderness of Paran. This is where they send the 12 spies to scout out the Promised Land. 2 of those spies come back, and they're really optimistic.
But the other 10 are freaked out, and they don't trust God, and they go around saying, we're going to get annihilated in there. And so they start a mutiny, and they try to appoint a new leader who's going to take all the people back to Egypt. And so basically, they are refusing to go into the Promised Land, and God honors their choice. He says that this generation is going to wander for 40 years and die in the wilderness, and only their kids will get to enter the Promised Land.
You know, this story here gets brought up many times in the Bible by different authors.
Yeah, and it always serves as a reminder that while God remains faithful to his people and his promises, he will honor their choices. He'll let them waste their whole lives if they choose to live in rebellion.
Okay, so the trip's been a disaster so far.
And it gets worse here in this 4th section as they're traveling to Moab. Even Moses has a moment of rebellion and is disqualified from entering the Promised Land. Then there's another rebellion among the people that results in this snake attack. And what makes all these rebellions even worse is that every step of the way, God has been providing. He's been offering forgiveness. He's been giving them food and water and this crazy stuff called manna.
Yeah, what is that stuff?
Yeah, no idea. But in spite of all this, they keep complaining, and they say that they wish they had died in slavery in Egypt.
If I was God, I would just give up on these guys.
You would think. But that's what makes this story in the final section so surprising. Israel has just arrived in Moab, and the king of Moab, he's freaked out that this huge group of people is traveling through his land. So he hires this pagan sorcerer named Balaam to pronounce curses on them.
This guy means business.
Yeah, and so Balaam, he says, okay, I'm going to pray to the Hebrew God and let's see what happens. And 3 different times he attempts to curse them, but each time he finds that he can utter only blessing. Most surprising is the last blessing, where he prophesies that out of Israel will rise a victorious king. And this king is somehow going to be connected to God's promise to Abraham to bless all nations through this family. So here's Israel rebelling down in the camp, totally unaware that up in the hills, God is protecting and even blessing them.
The book ends here in Moab. Israel's getting ready to go into the promised land. They count up everyone again, just like at the beginning. They're leaving the old generation behind, including Moses.
But before they leave Moses, he gives them his last words of warning and wisdom. And that speech is what the next book, Deuteronomy, is all about.
All right, so there's the overview of the book of Numbers. Now let's rewind back to the beginning and dig in a little bit. Like I said, we're going to cover a lot of ground today, but let me start with Numbers chapter 1, verse 1. Here's how it begins. The Lord spoke to Moses in the tent of meeting in the wilderness of Sinai on the first day of the second month of the second year after Israel's departure from the land of Egypt. Take a census of the entire Israelite community, right? Or count the entire Israelite community by their clans and their ancestral families, counting the names of every male one by one. You and Aaron are to register those who are 20 years old or more by their military divisions, everyone who can serve in Israel's army. So the book of Numbers starts off with taking a census of the Israelites, right? That's where the name Numbers comes from. They start by counting everyone who is eligible for military duty. That brings me to the second point, if you're taking notes, the census. Right, so they go and they do that. Here's how the end of chapter 1 reads. So all the Israelites, 20 years old or more, everyone who could serve in Israel's army, were registered by their ancestral families. All those registered numbered 603,550. That is a big number. That number, 603,000, that would be slightly larger than like a Baltimore, Maryland. Right, or a little smaller than Louisville, Kentucky. Just for sake of reference, like Erie proper, its population is around 93,000. Buffalo, its population is 275,000. So this group that just got counted is about 2.5 times the size of Buffalo. And don't miss this, that number, the 603,000, that number only includes males who are 20 years and older. So scholars put this number closer to like 2.4, 2.5 million people by the time you would count everyone. 2.5 million, that's closer to like Houston, Texas, or Chicago. Like, that is amazing. That is a staggering large number of people. Now, there's some debate as to whether or not this is an accurate number. Is it possible they weren't counting people but counting something else? After reading some commentators and things, I choose to take this number literally. This is the size of the group of the nation that was moving around. I think the point here is just to marvel at God's amazing provision and power and direction that He can direct a group of people that large from one place to another and provide for them and protect them all in the same way. I think that's what God is doing here, and it's simply amazing. And Numbers 1 ends like this: the Israelites did everything just as the Lord had commanded Moses. It brings us to the camp. Here's how the next chapter starts. Verse 1, the Lord spoke to Moses and Aaron. The Israelites are to camp under their respective banners beside the flags of their ancestral families. They are to camp around the tent of meeting at a distance from it, right? So they're going to put the tabernacle in the middle. Everybody else is going to camp around it. Judah's military divisions will camp on the east side, toward the sunrise, under their banner. His military division numbers is 74,600. The tribe of Issachar will camp next to it. His military division numbers 54,400. The tribe of Zebulun will be next. His military numbers 57,400. The total number in their military divisions who belong to Judah's encampment is 186,400. They will move out first. Okay, maybe you're getting a sense of why they call this book Numbers, but God gives them directions exactly how to lay out their camp. Put God's presence, put the tabernacle in the middle. Everybody else is going to go around it. Here's going to go to the east, and then in the following verses, God tells them who's going to go to the north, the south, and then the west sides. We're going to come back to this in a bit, but here's what else we read in Numbers chapter 2. The Israelites did everything the Lord commanded Moses. They camped by their banners in this way and moved out the same way. Now, in the next few chapters, God gives them instructions on how to organize, how to care for, how to pack up and move the tabernacle, right? They're going to be journeying through, so they need to know how to do this. God is very concerned with his holiness. That's what we learned in the book of Leviticus. So he gives many regulations and rules to help the Israelites keep themselves pure. And watch how they respond. Numbers chapter 3, verse 51, he gave the redemption silver to Aaron and his sons in, here's the key word, obedience to the Lord, just as the Lord commanded Moses. And then a chapter later, Numbers 4:49, at the Lord's command, they were registered under the direction of Moses, each one according to his work and transportation duty, and his assignment was as the Lord commanded Moses. We're picturing here, God is giving commands, they're obeying. Brings us to the completion. In chapters 7 and 8, where we focus on the completion, they finish the building of the tabernacle. They have a dedication ceremony for it. They dedicate the priests. There's this whole thing that goes on. In chapter 9, God tells them to be sure to observe the Passover. Remember their deliverance from the land of Egypt. And then the coolest thing happens next. It's the cloud, okay, in your notes, the cloud. In the last half of chapter 9, we see this amazing scene where a cloud that represents or is the presence of God, it dwells over the tabernacle during the day. And everybody can see it from wherever they are. And then at night, the cloud appears to be this pillar of fire. And when the cloud would move, they would move. And when the cloud would stop, they would stop. That's how they knew where to go. They were quite literally following God. Here's the instructions. Numbers chapter 9, I'm in verse 20. Sometimes the cloud remained over the tabernacle for only a few days. They would camp, remember setting up their camp just as God told them to, people to the east, the north, the south, the west. They would camp at the Lord's command and set out at the Lord's command. Sometimes the cloud remained only from evening until morning. When the cloud lifted in the morning, they set out. Or it remained a day and a night. They moved out when the cloud lifted. Whether it was 2 days, a month, or longer, the Israelites camped and did not set out as long as the cloud stayed over the tabernacle. And when it was lifted, they set out. They camped at the Lord's command, and they set out at the Lord's command. Boy, that would have been just fascinating to witness, right? To be there and to just be watching the cloud, maybe just kind of out of the corner of your eye, or maybe they had designated people watching it, and when the cloud began to move, you knew it. And the shout would go out, hey, it's moving, let's pack up, let's get going. They had procedures for doing all of that, and here they go. They're moving out, and they're continuing on their way to the promised land. Whew, okay, first 9 chapters. So at this point, you might be asking yourself, why are we studying this? Why do we take time to go through a book like Numbers? Why was this even recorded? Like, what does it matter? Why spend what equates to a PBC lifetime? Okay, what do I mean by that? We've had, by my rough count, 59 different total sermon series between Pastor Andy and myself since we started here back in the beginning of 2020. 59 different sermon series. You know how long the average length of those sermon series is? How many weeks they will go on? It's 4.4. That's the average length. Now, it may not seem like that right now because the series Acts that Pastor Andy just got done doing, it was 8 weeks. I think Numbers is going to be 8 weeks. So that's why I say, why spend in a PBC lifetime of 8 weeks in a book like Numbers? Okay, I think there's 3 reasons why. Here's the first one. I think one of the reasons why we study a book like Numbers is in order to teach, or you could write to learn. Let me go to 2 Timothy chapter 3, verse 16. This might be a familiar verse to you. All Scripture is inspired by God, and it is profitable for teaching, for rebuking, for correcting, for training in righteousness. Notice the word all there, right? That's the key word. This includes both the New Testament, where we spend a lot of our time, but also the Old Testament as well, right? All Scripture is profitable for teaching. There's something to learn here in the book of Numbers. And if that just wasn't enough, look at what Romans chapter 15 says. Look at what Paul says. For whatever was written in the past, that would include the book of Numbers, was written for our instruction, so that we may have hope through endurance and through the encouragement from the Scriptures. So we're going to look through the book of Numbers and ask ourselves, what is it that we're supposed to do? What is it that we're not supposed to do? And that leads me into the second reason we study a book like this. It's to give hope. We just read that in those verses. When we see the endurance of those that were living by faith, or God's steadfastness in the face of adversity, taking care of the Israelites, that gives us hope that God will do the same thing for us too. We gain hope when we learn about it. We're reminded of the characteristics of God, when we see who He is, when we see His faithfulness on full display, always remembering the Israelites, when we see His providential control, His sovereignty over these people. And when I stop and recognize that that is the same God I worship, that gives me hope. There's a third reason we look at a book like Numbers, and that's to serve as a warning. This book serves as a warning to us. If you needed more proof of that, here is what Paul writes elsewhere, this time specifically about the book of Numbers. Those first two verses we read, he's talking more in general terms. Now he's going to talk about the book of Numbers. 1 Corinthians chapter 10, it reads like this. Now, I do not want you to be unaware, brothers and sisters, right? Don't be ignorant. Pay attention to this, he's saying, that our ancestors were all under the cloud. Right, there's reference to the cloud. All passed through the sea. All were baptized into Moses in the cloud and in the sea. They all ate the same spiritual food and all drank the same spiritual drink, for they drank from the spiritual rock that followed them, and that rock was Christ. So he's talking about the people in the wilderness here. That's what he's doing. But now, if we could put a spoiler alert right here, because up to this point in the book of Numbers, everything's going fine. They're doing everything that God has commanded them to do. They're obeying. They're on their way. But why is Paul writing this? Spoiler alert, here's what he goes on to say in the next verse. Nevertheless, God was not pleased with most of them, since they were struck down in the wilderness. Now these things took place as examples for us, so that we will not desire evil things as they did. Don't become idolaters, as some of them were. As it is written, the people sat down to eat and drink and got up to party. Let us not commit sexual immorality, as some of them did. And in a single day, 23,000 people died. Let us not test Christ as some of them did, and were destroyed by snakes. And don't grumble as some of them did, and were killed by the destroyer. These things happened to them as examples, and they were written for our instruction, on whom the ends of the ages have come. Paul is shouting out here, don't repeat history. These things were written down so that you would learn from their mistakes. Because friends, spoiler alert, the people in the book of Numbers, they're going to make a lot of mistakes. And God is going to take their sin seriously. And so we study the book of Numbers as a warning to us. And we study the book of Numbers to have hope in God's faithfulness. And we study the book of Numbers to learn. So, with all that being said, what is the lesson here then in these first 9 or 10 chapters? What is it we can take from this? Now, we've covered a lot. And I want to be careful in drawing applications, meaning, and Pastor Andy touched on this a little bit last week, is this prescriptive or descriptive? And I think the book of Numbers, for the most part, is descriptive. So I don't want to take like direct commands from Numbers and apply them to us. If I happen to look out my window and I saw somebody like following a cloud in the sky because they think that's where they're supposed to go, because isn't that what they did in the book of Numbers? No, we've drawn the wrong application there. But I think when we consider what Paul wrote, there are definitely some principles, some lessons here, not only in all of the book of Numbers, but in this section that we've covered, that we can take and find hope in and find warning from. Here's the first one. If God has the power and ability to direct and provide for millions of people that are on a journey, he can do the same for you and me. Let me say that again. If God has the power and the ability to direct and provide for millions of people on a journey, which he did throughout the book of Exodus, he's going to do it throughout the book of Numbers and on into the future, then he can certainly do the same thing for you and me. Friends, God has not forgotten about you. There may be times when it might feel that way, but when I go back and look at the book of Numbers and see God's faithfulness, I can be assured that God has not forgotten about me. Pastor Andy used this line last week when he was finishing up this series in the book of Acts. God will give you exactly what you need for your assignment, and we can have confidence in that fact as we go about our day. And this study in the book of Numbers teaches us that. God showed that truth in the book of Acts. He shows it here in the book of Numbers, as we'll see, and we see it in our own lives each day. And one should not doubt, maybe just because of our circumstances, God's ability, his power, his providence, his protection. He can provide for them. He did provide for them, and he will provide for me. Here's the second principle that we see in these first several chapters. God expects to be at the center and to be followed. If not, if he's not at the center, if he's not being followed, bad things are going to happen. We see this in the book of Numbers, both literally and figuratively. Literally, in that God's instructions when they made camp was that the tabernacle, the thing that housed his presence, where God's presence dwelled, it was to be literally at the center of the camp. But also figuratively, in that all of the instructions, the setup, the sacrifices, their entire way of life, all of it revolved around God and his glory, their pursuit of him. And that's what they did. How many times in these verses that we've looked at today did we read the Israelites did what God commanded them to do? They obeyed. And up to this point, everything is going fine. But it's not going to be that way much longer. Right? I said the book of Numbers is about how a 10-day journey ends up taking 40 plus years. Why? Because they allowed their priorities to get out of order. They stopped putting Jesus in the center. They stopped following him. Pastor Andy gave us this line last week as well. Following Jesus affects every aspect of life. Your finances, your leisure time, your relationships, your priorities, your thoughts, and your emotions. Friends, nothing good ever comes from trying to separate Jesus from a category in my life. And in the book of Numbers, the people are about to demonstrate what it looks like when God isn't at the center. And they don't believe that he's going to do what he says he'll do. One more. I think the third principle to take from here is that God is very intentional. He is always very intentional in everything he does. I want to illustrate this by going back to Numbers chapter 2. I breezed over this the first time, but let's go back and pull it back out. God lays out here in Numbers 2 how they're to set up their camp. Right? He says he's to be at the center. The Levi, the tribe of Levi, that's where the priests came from. They set their camp up right around where the tabernacle is, and then everybody else is going to go around that. And we read in verse 3 how there's 3 tribes totaling 186,400. They're laid out to the east. Now on this diagram that I have for you, east for us is going to be at the bottom. And then in verse 10, he gives the order for 3 more tribes to be laid out to the south. The tribes of Reuben, Simeon, and Gad. Their total is 151,400. Then, a few verses later, 3 more tribes, Ephraim, Manasseh, and Benjamin, to the west. That's going to be totaling 108,100. Do you see where this is going? Finally, in verse 25, the final 3 tribes to the north, Dan, Naphtali, and Asher. That's totaling 157,600. Look at the picture that paints. Those boxes are drawn on a scale. That is how it would have looked. That is amazing. even in something as seemingly unimportant of how the tribes are arranged at camp. And maybe people scratch their heads and say, why do I got to go to the east? Maybe I want to go to the north. Or why do I got to be here? Even in all of that, God is pointing to the story of redemption, where someone looking up high, looking down below on this nation of Israel, these 2.4 million people would have seen it in the shape of a cross traveling through the desert. And he is pointing to the fact that one day the promise made in the book of Genesis of a Messiah who will come to save the world from its sins, to defeat Satan and death once and for all, will one day be fulfilled. And God is using these people, this story in the book of Numbers, to do just that. God is very intentional in everything that he does. He expects to be at the center. He expects to be followed. If not, bad things are going to happen. And if he can provide for 2.5 million people on a journey through the wilderness, he can provide for you and for me. Friends, learn from the book of Numbers. Don't be distracted by the title. Don't think there's nothing here that we need to pay attention to. The people in the book of Numbers, as we're going to see in the coming weeks, well, they make a lot of mistakes. And it's there for us to learn from. I'm praying that this series will do just that. It will help us learn to be informed, that it will give us hope, and it will serve as a warning. Things are good right now for the Israelites in the book of Numbers, but it's not going to stay that way for long. Next week, we'll see what happens when they begin to remove God from the center of their lives.
I want to leave you today with a promise that God spoke to Moses. It's recorded for us in Exodus 33:14, and this is what God said. My presence will go with you, and I will give you rest. As I reflect on that, I'm just reminded it's God's presence that makes all the difference. And if you are a Jesus follower, God is present with you. We'll see you all next time. PBC friends, you are deployed.